To the Curriculum Committee for the Board of Education. Thank you all for coming this morning. We have some guests today to talk to us, and I think first call to order. We have a quorum. Okay, I think we want to go on to our first discussion item. Are you ready? And the first discussion item is the impact of the curriculum department positions, and I think some of those people are here today to help bring this all to light for all of us. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. So I want to introduce the curriculum department that has joined me today. We have Annie Tucci, who is the 612 Humanities Supervisor, Linda Johnson, the Elementary Director, Jeff Corbishley, who is the 612 Math Science Supervisor, and of course, Wes DeSantis, who's our Director of Instructional Technology and everything technology related. So the purpose of these meetings, since this is our first meeting of the year, and we plan to have several across the year, is to make sure that we are keeping the board up to date of the work that the curriculum department is doing in relation to our district goals, and also to give us an opportunity to be responsive and to hear your feedback across the members of the board and specifically from this committee, because some of the things that we talk about in this committee end up becoming larger presentations to the Board of Education. So the first thing, if you could put up the second slide, John, the first thing that we wanted to spend a few minutes talking with you about is the impact of the new curriculum department positions that have been in place starting in April. But really, it was in August when we had all three positions filled. And the positions that we're speaking about are the elementary director, the 612 humanities supervisor, and the 612 math science supervisor. Before these positions were created, if you remember, there was a K-12 math science and a K-12 humanities director. So these three positions have replaced those two. And I wanted to make sure that we took some time to talk about the impact of these positions and how these positions are working to support curriculum and instruction K-12. So to begin with, the elementary director is a new position in Ridgefield, though this is a similar position to that other districts in our DIRG have. So in thinking about what this position does, oftentimes we say this is elementary everything. But really, some examples that this position supports and supervises begins with creating common platforms for storing and accessing curriculum. Remember, we have 6 elementary schools, so creating common places for teachers to go to have access to that assessment calendar, the curriculum, scope and sequence, resources for intervention, all of that is supervised and collected in collaboration with teachers and elementary principals by the elementary director. The elementary director also works with the literacy coaches, interventionists across all 6 schools and supports the implementation of curriculum and the implementation of the MTSS process through that support. The elementary director is the person who is also making sure that the assessment calendar is up to date and doing all the research and providing that to teachers and administrators if any changes do come across. You've already heard Linda Johnson, our elementary director, talk about the work that she's already done in the implementation of the phonemic awareness curriculum resource and the work that the committee is doing to decide on a new phonics resource that we will implement next fall. So she's very involved with building principals. Our building principals are instructional leaders, but the elementary director really is the person that helps lead the work moving forward between the 6. So that's just a quick summary of the many things that this position does. And I do have to say, it's not just the core content areas that the elementary director supports, but it's also the essentials. So the 612 humanities supervisor and math science supervisors, because these positions have a smaller scope than in the past, these supervisors are able to closely support teachers and administrators in the schools. They are in one of the 3 schools every single day, supporting the implementation of curriculum, supporting those transitional years, which we'll talk about a little bit later. They are content experts. So they have a different viewpoint into the content than perhaps a building principal who might have multiple content experience, but perhaps not being a specialist. They also are supporting the interventionists, 612, and the intervention program 612. Just for an example, the 612 math science supervisor is very involved in math placement and working closely with the elementary director. And very involved doesn't just mean working with the team to come up with a criteria, but it also means that he is able to be in classrooms with counselors, with teachers, with administrators to study the impact of the placement process. How well did we do? Taking a look at students who were on our watch list to see how they're progressing, if they do need to be moved up at this point of the year, and doing all of that reflection and support. So that was a very listy but general overview of these positions and how they're currently working. So I'm happy to take any questions about them.
Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Tina, no, Tina, go ahead.
Okay, Corey, just because I know parents will watch this later on,
Yep.
and math placement is like a big hot button topic in our town. Just want to, I understand what you shared about elementary director and Annie doing this, but I also want to ask, I hope that teachers are involved too, because, you know, we go back to the most strongest connection. Teachers know the child beyond just their scores, you know. So I hope that the teachers are involved in this placement, because everybody may feel strongly either side of the debate if test scores and data is the only way to drive a child's placement. So I hope that personal connection, the teacher's relationship with the student is one of the strong or one of the bigger points also in a placement of a child for math in middle school.
Okay, so you 2 things that you asked. One is, I just want to reassure you that as last year, this is a collaborative process with teachers, administrators, and now will be led by me, but really especially by Linda and Jeff, because they're now fully in those positions. So absolutely a collaborative process.
I'm sorry, I said Annie. I'm still round 3 and prednisone, so I always do tough stuff. Sorry about that.
Yes, it was Jeff. It's okay. It's okay. Yes, it's a collaborative process. And then the second part about the different criteria, even last year, there was only one standardized measure, and there was a whole process that really did take the whole child into account and included teacher input. So Jeff and Linda have already begun working on what the process will be this year. And we will have that to parents around the time of report cards. So at the elementary level, when they go in to meet with their 5th grade math teacher, they will know what the criteria is and what the process is for math placement.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you're talking about this much earlier when the kid is already just started 5th grade, because usually it was always almost about when they were going to go into 6th grade. So I think that also added undue stress. Absolutely. And parents weren't clear where they go. And we all know math is, you know, the track in middle school almost seems defined to where high school is, which once you get to high school, you know, that's really almost true, but not quite, because kids can double up and some kids can. So I don't want to take that away, but thank you for starting this much earlier, because it really will help to, you know, take away stress, I'm hoping, and anxiety that all children and parents feel. So thank you.
Jeff, did you want to add anything on about middle school into high school math?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would say is that the teachers between 8th and 9th grade are in constant communication. So the department leaders are in constant communication. So what's done in 8th grade, the skill sets, the mathematical practice dispositions, all of that gets transferred over to the high school, because we are as well trying to work on that 8th to 9th grade. While it's not really as much of a placement decision, it's much more of a content and instructional practice conversation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other questions just about those positions? Kathleen?
It's not quite a question, but first of all, thank you because I know there's always questions in the community and on the board about new administrative positions. And I love the way you laid it out today, and continue to do this anecdotally if you can't do it even with data points about how this not only supports the children's learning and the district's goals, but also I think when these are good people and good work is being done, how it really takes things off the plates of teachers and helps them to collaborate and do the work that they need to do working with children. And I think you put a lot of the data points out about what they do, but to keep using this anecdotally, I think it's so important, because some people forget about that layer that's so necessary.
Right, because if we didn't have them, I'm only one person, so I couldn't be in all the schools and the classrooms and getting to know teachers so that any of the decisions that we make come from the classroom instead of coming from outside of the classroom. So that is very important to us, and that is what these positions are allowing us to do.
Yeah, and it brings transparency for the teachers because there's that next level where they have communication. And
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions about the positions, or should we move on? Okay, John, can you put up the next slide? So on Monday night, I think it was Monday night, last Monday night, we shared the standardized assessment data that was from the spring of 21. And those were assessments that are required by the state of Connecticut. So we talked about the different assessments from grades 3 to 8, and then the 11th grade assessments, the NGSS and the SAT. And we talked about the data that we saw during the pandemic, and then we did do some comparisons to pre-pandemic. And as was noted by the board and as is noted here every single day, one of our big goals is making sure if there was any missed learning that we are taking that into account as we continue to move forward. That is something as well that we talked about, is the concept of acceleration, which is universally a goal for all school districts. We don't want to go back to, we don't want to spend our whole next couple of years remediating. We want to continue to move forward and smartly pull in any missed learning along the way. So today we wanted to share a little bit more explicitly than we did in the presentation on Monday, some of the ways that we are supporting missed learning. And we're going to talk about what that's looked like at the 6-8 level, so in the 2 middle schools in the area of intervention. And we're also going to talk a little bit more specifically about the Algebra Lab that we are so excited that we got up and running very quickly with the help of all the leaders at the high school, and Jeff, even before he was in his current position when he was the department chair at the high school. So we're going to start with Jeff talking about the work that he's done in math at the middle school level. I may jump in, and then Annie's going to talk about the work the parallel work that she's doing at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Corey. Good morning, everyone. So part of what we have really been doing this year is we've really tried to make an effort, knowing that student learning was affected last year, but also to remember that math has really been a goal in this district for a number of years, even prior to COVID happening. So we know that the intervention program at the 6-8 level for math is really crucial. A lot of what we did, even prior to when I started in the spring and in the summer, was really solidify the whole MTSS process to make sure that we're looking at multiple measures, that we are calibrating across buildings, that an experience in ERMs and an experience in SERMs can be as similar as possible. So in the past, we have had these math specialist positions, but I think it's important to remember that because of the need to cover classes, those positions weren't always they didn't always play out as intended. So what I mean by that is there was always an intention to have those roles be interventionist and coach for teachers. And because of the need to cover classes, those same people ended up having to do teaching as part of their day, which took away from the intervention time. So part of what happened last year was there was an additional Title I teacher that got moved up to a 1.0, so that essentially each building could have a 1.5 interventionist kind of position, with the specialist doing additional coaching for the teacher. So I just wanted to remind everyone of the history of that, because in order to provide the interventions, we really need enough interventionists to be able to provide that support for students and to ensure that the groupings are small enough to really make it targeted for each of the groups of students. So again,
Let me just jump in one
please
second.
do.
Sorry.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say one more thing about those positions. So of course, when they were created, I was not here, but I know that the intention was, as Jeff said, to make sure that we had highly qualified teachers who are the interventionists and then supporting teachers across the 3 grade levels at the middle school. Overages, just, needing a course here, a course there taught, meant that that person had many challenges, had many different hats. So 3 different hats. So classroom teacher, coach, and interventionist. So in preparation for this year, when we were already seeing that math was going to have the largest impact, we wanted to make sure, as we planned, and this work was done with Jeff and with the building teams, that we had our best staff primed and ready to go. So they do not have our overages this year. We were just actually lucky with that. We reallocated additional funds to the Title I teacher who is split across those schools. She was still working across the schools and supporting intervention last year, but now she's, like Jeff said, at 0.5 at each school. So knowing that we were going to have more students, we wanted to have our most qualified staff. And then, like Jeff said, we just wanted to make sure that we had even additional staffing to cover the amount of students that perhaps would need it. Sorry to jump in, Jeff.
No, it's great. No, that's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think what Corey really was getting at is that the need to have that specialized person in that role is really crucial, because what those specialists are doing is they're looking at multiple measures. So it's not just a single data point. So yes, they're using NWEA to kind of look at student progress. That's one data point. But then what the specialists are doing, the interventionists are doing, is they are reaching out to the classroom teacher, getting information, looking at classroom assessments, to really figure out what the specific needs of the students are. So what the program does is the specialists will be able to group students in smaller groups around a specific area or topic. So for example, let's say that a student is showing need in algebraic reasoning or algebraic thinking. The interventionists are able to design specific targeted support for those students outside of class, so that they can almost fill in the prerequisite knowledge that may be missing, so that they're able to access the grade level content. And they're doing that in small groups because it needs to be targeted, so that they can really reach every single kid. They're also they're monitoring progress through that time. So if there's a very specific skill or set of skills that a student needs to master to show success at grade level standard, those interventionists are creating SMART goals, right? They're directly teaching to that specific skill or need area, and then monitoring how the students are doing throughout time. So that's really the basic structure. The other thing that's important to point out is that it's meant to be very fluid. Because it's targeted towards specific skills, students could go in and out depending on their needs. So a student may have an area of need around the idea of geometry, but maybe numbers and operations, they don't need as much support. So what the specialists are doing is creating these groups so that students can go in and out when they need, and they're trying to hit those topics within the calendar year when they arrive within the grade level content. So there really is a concerted effort with the specialists to work with the classroom teachers. And so far, that's really what they're doing. They're also working collaboratively between buildings. I'll just share with you that the specialists meet every other day as a group to talk about things that they're seeing, willing to make adjustments as needed, and sharing resources. So a lot of the ideas between buildings are shared between them and myself I really get to see them. I think my role specifically for this particular portion, I'm very involved. So I'm really in those buildings, as Corey said, really almost every day, communicating with the specialists and the interventionists to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible. And I think, Annie, do you want to maybe touch a little bit about the literacy side?
Sure. So, hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all. So for our 6-8 literacy program for intervention, it's similar to how Jeff was explaining about mathematics intervention. Literacy does have different processes to it. Unlike mathematics, our literacy interventionists have been in a full position for a number of years now. So they have these systems set up in place, and so my role in that is really with meeting regularly with them to support them, working to make sure that they have access to professional development between both schools, connecting with them regularly, visiting, spending time in the literacy rooms and getting to know them and getting to know the students. And then also just seeing the process. So sometimes, just like mathematics, literacy intervention is fluid, right? So kids are coming in and out as needed. And sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to find what support exactly it is that a student needs for reading. So because it's not always so linear, right, with reading. So, and with reading, we are always learning more about our abilities. So our goal is to be as effective as possible with engaging the process for entrance, and exit criteria, and then also having students that were already in last year, they started this year, right, hitting the ground running. And the curriculum specialists make constant contact with families, with teachers, counselors. So there's this idea of the huddle, like our students have a huddle, support system to ensure that they are as successful as they can.
And one of the things that Annie did was coordinate with Linda. As you know, the elementary specialists and coaches, and now all the pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade teachers had professional learning in phonemic awareness. The intervention program that goes along with the Heggerty Phonemic Awareness Curriculum Resource is actually for grades 2 to 5. So Annie and Linda coordinated to make sure that the middle school interventionists receive that same professional learning, because while it's not going to be as common in middle school, it could be something that we find in 6th grade that is a need. So it's that, I think that you're hearing from Jeff and Annie that it's being the person in the middle, being the person who supports across the buildings, communicates with school leaders, with counselors. That's really the power of these positions, these on the ground positions. So after talking about 6th through 8th grade intervention and how these two roles are supporting the teachers and the counselors in the buildings in this work, I wanted Jeff to take a little bit of time to talk to you more specifically than before about the Algebra One lab, how that work started last year, and where we are right now.
Yeah. So, this idea of intervention, at the 6-8 level, it's always been in the structure, even at the K-5 level. The high school has always been a little bit more challenging. So in my previous role, I was the department chair for a number of years. So in my previous role, we really knew that Algebra One was the foundational course that really could predict success in future math courses. So having a robust, strong foundation of Algebra One is really imperative. So this is where this idea of the Algebra One lab came into being, is that we really felt that the best way to support our students for future math courses was to really give them as much support and intervention in Algebra One as possible. Now, the structure will look a little different than at the 6-8 level, right? We don't have set specialists or interventionists. So the way that this looks at the high school is that the students are actually meeting outside of class with their Algebra One teacher, their own Algebra One teacher. So there's some benefits to that, right? The Algebra One teacher, they see the students really every day in class. They get to see all the work that they're submitting. They can kind of target in on their need areas a little faster because they get so much exposure to the mathematics that they're demonstrating. So the Algebra One teacher gets to meet with these students outside of the class period, again, in small groups. It's also important to know the way it got scheduled is it was scheduled opposite their science lab so that it doesn't take away from a core course. A student doesn't have to choose between an elective and taking part in the Algebra One lab. So it's already set aside for them in their schedule. And the way that the Algebra One teachers are doing this, and I will just share that the Algebra One teachers that are doing this, they're doing some really phenomenal work. These are some of the teachers in the department that really understand mathematics. They understand how to break down ideas, and they understand how to deliver that to students. So the teachers that are in this program right now were really intentionally chosen because they're so good at that work. And what they're doing, just as an example, is they're looking at a particular unit of study. They're then breaking down what are the key topics within that unit. They're then figuring out, okay, for those key topics, what are those prerequisite skills that students would need to have going into those topics? They're then going another level and saying, well, what are some of the misconceptions and common errors that we would see within the topic and with the prerequisites? And then they're designing all of their intervention and their instruction on meeting those common errors, those prerequisites. And it's really important for Algebra One, right? These students are in an Algebra One course, credit bearing, that the students see the explicit connection between what they're learning as a prerequisite skill and how it connects to the algebra content that they're learning in class. Because without that, students will just really think that they're doing, middle school math level work, but they need to explicitly see that connection to the high school level content. So that's another important element of this program. But again, it's targeted. The teachers are able to, again, move students in and out as needed. And they are looking at multiple measures to be able to pull those students in and provide that targeted support. So while it does look a little different at the high school level, you'll see that a lot of the same elements and a lot of the same themes at the middle school in terms of how the intervention is being run, in terms of the content, the breaking down of ideas. That same thing is happening in the 9th grade Algebra One classes this year as well.
And I just want to, add on a little bit more that the math department at the high school has felt passionate about this need for a while. And we had a perfect storm of support. So Dr. Greenwood came in to Ridgefield, and Jeff's team and me and all of us are really excited and passionate about getting this foundational structure underway. It is exciting when I go into any of the math labs or see the group of teachers working together who do seem to connect almost every single day, because they are creating something that we haven't had in place before. But the energy and the passion around this project is super high and really, really exciting for all of us. So thank you for all the support at the buildings and from the teachers and to those 5 teachers who are working extra hard to make sure that this course fulfills everything that we believe that it should. So this has been really exciting. And regardless of COVID, this was important, but we feel like, of course, even more important this year, we're able to support kids who had some missed learning for next year, but make it relevant to them. And that's what Jeff has done so much work on with his team, is the difference between homework help, right, which is all just here in the moment, and intervention, which takes you back a little bit into prerequisite skills and then immediately connects you back into your Algebra One coursework. So it's really exciting. There's a lot of energy behind it. Kids are not missing other classes when they're in that lab. There is exit and entrance criteria. So a lot of really exciting things. So happy to take any questions about the 2 examples that we just gave about how we're supporting missed learning this year. Tina.
So thank you. I think it's great work that you're doing. I totally appreciate what you're doing for freshmen for Algebra One, because we all know strong foundations in algebra is very important as they go through high school. It is one of the core topics that comes in the BSAT testing too. So I'm going to go back to something that I've said a few times. Sophomores, they missed 3 months of algebra at the end of 8th grade. And it's just because I'm immersed in the sophomore world, if you will. And I'm hearing from more and more sophomore parents, students, they're struggling with Algebra 2, especially kids who are in Algebra 2 honors or above, right? And the PSAT is coming up. So I thank you for doing that for a freshman. I love the way you've placed it and everything, but I do want to highlight that I want to ask, how are you supporting the sophomores? Because it's so important they get the help too, because they truly did miss out. And 8th grade, end of 8th grade is critical for whatever, for the strong content area in Algebra 2 building, and they missed 3 months of that. So I hope you can highlight how you're helping. I'm sorry, I feel like a broken
No,
record.
that's okay.
No.
That's okay. And I know that
They
no
are,
problem.
and this is because again, I'll say this because it's constantly in my ear, like always 24/7. So I had to ask.
Sure. Jeff can talk to you about some of the work that Dr. Greenwood and his team did in the spring across all departments, and then the work that they're doing now for just that purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think, Tina, you hit upon something that I think every math teacher was also very concerned about, because we know how the importance of that Algebra One Foundation. So working with Dr. Greenwood, myself as the department chair at the time, along with some geometry teachers, in the spring, anticipating this could be a concern or will be a concern, we took some curriculum writing and really looked at the geometry course to find ways to really embed more algebra than what we typically do. So when, I even was walking through a geometry classroom last week, and in addition to the geometry content they were learning, they were weaving in the Algebra 1 skills that the students did end up missing last year. We know that they did not necessarily master all the algebra standards. So what the geometry teachers did is they made sure that those same standards were woven into the geometry course, and in more ways than typically, where they're actually going to take time to explicitly teach some algebra content in geometry, knowing that it wasn't covered necessarily or maybe as deeply last year. So we did anticipate that being a concern, and we really wanted to find ways this year to help the students here and now with that algebra content so that they can have a bridge of algebra, if you will, between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So hopefully next year, they'll have, again, that stronger foundation, having Algebra 1 and then a heavy algebra-induced geometry course.
And that's work that they did not just in geometry, but across all the courses in the pathway, just to make sure. So all teachers gave that assessment at the end of the year, the diagnostic, and then made adjustments to scope and sequence for this current year. And again, as you're hearing, we will be adjusting along the way. And depending on how students are doing each quarter, we're going to have to make additional adjustments, right? So we planned for them, we're making them now, but this is getting to the time when we do a little reassessment and think about what are we noticing in student progress and where are some places we're going to need to adjust. And we're going to have to work on this path for several years. So we also don't want parents or students to think that it's a one-shot deal. This is over time. We want to de-stress the moment. We're so happy to be back, but you're right. It's different. Getting back into the same pace in classroom does take some adjustment. So just know that we are continuing to study. We didn't just do the work in the spring.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you talk about the here and now too, because, it's so important that you collect data for sophomore after the end of this quarter, and then maybe even compare it to how the freshmen are doing. This is anecdotal, and I'm sorry I'm bringing it up, but the freshmen are thriving in Algebra 2 honors and stuff. So obviously something worked. I mean, it did work, but there are sophomores, and it's anecdotal, so I don't know how much of this is truth, but this is how it's shared. So if you do collect data, I think that'll really help guide the conversation. So thank you for mentioning the here and now part, and then you're going to look into it as we move into the future, because there are stressed parents and kids out there. So thank you for addressing that and keeping that in mind as we move forward.
Thank you. Any other questions about the two examples of how we're supporting the missed learning? Hi, Rachel. I think you're muted.
Okay, thank you, Corey. So good morning. I just want to say, I really appreciate how the meeting started going through, I think for families, the curriculum team and the need as a district that we have for this vital support team in place. That's very evident to me, and I think families will also appreciate that. So first of all, thank you. Math builds. So it starts from somewhere. It starts from our elementary schools, and then it leads into middle school and it goes into high school. So my thought process is that if kids are having difficulty for Algebra 1, then perhaps we need to revisit our elementary math education and see what supports that perhaps as a Board of Education we need to be supportive of this coming budget season. I think the Algebra 1 sounds wonderful, and I don't want to take away from that at all. It's just a pause for concern for me that in our elementary school we need to do more. So my questions are, one, do you think we need more interventionists in the school, on the ground, so to speak? Are they stretched too thin in servicing students? And then I know I brought this up at the Board of Education meeting, but I would really be in support of plans for new resources at the elementary level that'll support and differentiate for all learners. I think families are just looking for that. They want to help their children. They want to help them at home. I know we have Dreambox, and I know we're away from the workbook years, but I think that they want to help their students at home, no matter if they need extra support or if they need enrichment. So those are my comments, and I would love to see possibly at another curriculum meeting new resources.
Great. So I'll start with the first question about the interventionists and do we have enough? So that will be evident. You see that the team here is working and supporting interventionists K-9 really right now. So we will know as we continue to support the process along with our building leaders who are very involved in MTSS across the levels. We will know better as we work through this process, and especially since we're just starting to get to the end of our first assessment window, we'll have a better idea of numbers and where that stands. Linda Johnson, do you want to speak a couple minutes about where we're starting to go with math right now? It's in the very beginning stages.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Corey. Again, good morning, everyone. So similar to what you've heard Jeff and Annie say, I've established some systems and structures in terms of supporting our math coach / interventionist, right? Because our interventionist right now for elementary mathematics wears two hats, primarily servicing students who are in the MTSS multi-tiered support system, receiving explicit targeted instruction with a math interventionist. And then as schedules allow, our interventionist then puts on that coaching hat and works with classroom teachers to support that tier 1 instruction with our core curriculum. So first and foremost, establishing the systems, relationships, and how I'm working with them with truly the great work that's been going on, primarily led by our building administrators with our MTSS structure. From there, we've begun to collect feedback from our classroom teachers, administrators around the resources that they currently have and that they've been implementing, not only as core curriculum, but to support students who need that differentiation. So, currently we are collecting that feedback and we'll continue to do that. And then we're at the very beginning stages of having conversations around how we might keep some of our resources the same because it's in a great place, it's working, or what might we need to change. So we're starting to have those conversations. Initially, I've met and had discussions with our building administrators, our principals who are very invested in this, as well as our district math team, which involves the the math specialists. And Jeff has been part of those conversations as well. And I'll start to loop in Chrissy Salvestrini from the preschool. So we're beginning to have conversations around what resources might we like to study in terms of supporting our elementary mathematics program. And those resources, Rachel, as you mentioned, they might be resources in terms of a digital resource. Is it Dreambox? Is there another system out there? How can we support in terms of resources going home, differentiated instruction, and then of course resources at the core curriculum, that tier 1 level, where we know that if we have that rich, engaging mathematical experiences at the tier 1 level, that's going to meet in theory our students who are in our general education classrooms. So we're beginning those conversations, looking again at the resources we have and then other resources that are out there. And resources can range from digital systems to print to people, right? And that was one of your questions. Do we have enough interventionists? Do you feel we have enough folks on the ground supporting elementary mathematics? So that will be part of our conversation and our work.
Thank you so much. I think it's just really good to know that the conversations are happening. It sounds like you're really taking a thoughtful approach to this. It's not something that's fast and furious, saying, okay, we went down in our math score, so we need to get this right away. And I really appreciate that. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'll add on. We will be thoughtful. We'll have a process. We'll make it timely so that it makes sense for our students and our teachers. And we will have representation voice from our classroom teachers, as well as our our special education teachers who are implementing resources with our students. So, and we will keep you updated.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda. So really, hopefully the next time that we meet Rachel, we can have more information about where we are at the elementary level in that process, and if there are any needs moving forward that we're discovering. Any other questions?
Just a quick comment. I agree with what Rachel had said, and I'm Linda, I'm so happy the way you talked about the vertical articulation, because that's what I was thinking of, not even in terms of interventionists, but are there ways to bring algebraic thinking all the way down to the earliest levels, and what kind of resources do we need? Because some of it is just rethinking how it's done. So I think this is wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Great. So I think unless you have any other questions, we can move on. So we just wanted to take a few minutes to update you on what the professional learning is focused around this year. I think that you must have seen or must have heard that our big theme this year is rebounding. And as we have gone around to our schools, our individual school goals, many of them are related to this concept of rebounding, getting back into the game. But it also has an upbeat, fun connotation to it. So when we're thinking about rebounding and how that connects across the year in professional learning, we're thinking about 3 different things. One thing, of course, which has been done in Ridgefield so well over the years, is we're going to study. There are a lot of people in our field who are talking about best practices around how we do rebound. And that's where that whole concept of acceleration has come through. We stole the term rebound from Doug Fisher, who's a researcher out of California, and his crew. So their book is called Rebounding, and he has given us a lot of concepts to rebound back into. So it's not always about new thinking, it's new ways to think about old, not old really, but practices that we were doing with more ease prior to the start of the pandemic. So it's about that not just best practices, but ever growing best practices. So that's one thing that we've been doing as a district, is that study. Another really big focus of ours is what we've been calling the Huddle, just to stay in the basketball theme, but really it's about that collaboration. And if you can remember, we talked about it a lot in the spring as we prepared for the fall. And that collaboration is across many different levels. So it's between central office and the buildings. And I think you can hear from the way that I've described these new positions, how important that is, that we are in the building alongside teachers and administrators, because it's only by working together that we can really do what's best for kids and what's most necessary. So the huddle also includes the opportunities for departments to come together across the year. And we've already had between the end of August and then the early release day in September, departments have already had opportunities to come together at the essential level, K-12, and in the core content areas, 6-12, and then all the elementary schools coming together. And that collaboration is really where we can work on alignment, sharing best practices, assured experiences, and again, working through our long-term and short-term goals. Specifically, music and art have been doing a lot of work together. Music is working on really the pathways and building their programming across levels. What does it look like to move from 5th to 6th grade as a musician? This year, we have brought the 6th grade lessons to the middle school. So it's not only in 4th and 5th grade that students are able to experience small group lessons in their instrument, but it's also in 6th grade, because that was very important in retention and allowing the most students to enjoy all that our music program has to offer. So we're going to be sharing more out about the work of that team this year. Also very exciting, the work of the art department. We started the year with the art department at the Aldrich Museum, and the entire K-12 team participated in professional learning for educators there in the context of the most recent exhibits. And the focus of the professional learning beyond the artists was on mindfulness and how to bring that mindfulness and really the concepts that are already in place in this district around ruler and the understanding of the mood meter, how to bring that into art class as a way to help students rebound back into art as well as all the other content areas. So that was very exciting. So huddling has been about alignment. It has been about collaboration. It's been about short-term and long-term goals, but it's also really been, as you can tell from those examples, about building relationships across levels. Our teachers want to be connected across the levels, but we haven't always made the time for it. And that is one of our big goals this year. So it's not just that we're saying we're huddling, but we're giving our teachers the opportunity to spend time together. And Annie will talk a little bit more in a few minutes about, sorry, I forgot to leave that off, the study part, one of the most recent parts about the study that we've all engaged in. But really, finally, the thing that I think is so special about Ridgefield is the joy that we do all bring to this work, the joy and the privilege of working with students and with each other every single day. So we wanted to keep that on our radar for this year as a big goal, because we've been through some challenging times, and what is more important than making sure that we can celebrate together and be together in our huddle as we engage in this work, this really joyful work together. So that was just an overview of our big 3 focuses of professional learning. I'll take any questions, and then Annie's going to talk more specifically about the work that the majority of the departments did around student agency. All right. So if you can give us the next slide, John, and Annie, I'll talk to you a little bit more specifically about some of the study that we're doing underneath rebounding. And this is the study around building student agency. So Annie's going to talk just a little bit about that and why it's so important, and how our teachers engaged in it in this study on 9/23.
So one of the reasons that Rebound is such an effective mindset is because the largest bodies of research out there that really ground that research that Doug Fisher and his colleagues have done is about engagement, becoming lifelong learners, having academic success, and believing that you can learn, right? And this belief that you can participate in school and that you can persevere, right, through like challenging learning moments and things like that. So those largest bodies of research, they have a common thread between them, and that's student agency. In order to be an engaged learner, you have to be able to have agency, right? In order to be a reflective learner, you have agency. And in order to have control, right, and the power to be empowered, you have to have agency. And sometimes when people talk about agency, they're not necessarily talking about it in the sense that it's something that you have, but it's something that you do. It's an active participation in the learning process. So this is part of Doug Fisher's rebounding text, with much of the research that's included in that, and the theories of motivation behind that. So we wanted teachers know these things, but this year is a lot about revisiting and reminding us of the things that we know, right? We've gone through such a challenging couple of years, I would say, even at this point, right? And so now it's like we have to remind ourselves of the wonderful things. And these are the things that bring us joy, is when our students are engaged, when they are collaborators in their learning process. So the people have been engaging in ways to, teachers have been engaging in ways to help build that time for students so that they can do their own agency per se. So ways that can happen: reflection, discourse, talking to each other, having a moment to process what they have learned, right? A lot of the times, like the old practice of like drill and practice, right? It was missing a piece of that where students had an opportunity to talk about what they were just learning, right? Or take a moment to reflect, to let it sink in. So that helps by having that opportunity for what we call metacognition, what most people call it as reflective learning, is it increases a student's ability to believe that they can learn, and that they are part of that process. And then we also see focus on helping students to reestablish that relationship to learning and to school and being here, and having those conversations with their peers in small groups, or even advocating and talking with their teachers, their counselors. So that's going to increase their engagement and their motivation. And I added in here about modeling, because one of the best things in order to show somebody, right, and how to increase their own motivation is modeling. Whether it's a peer model, teacher model, parent model, whichever it is, right? A student having access to seeing something that they can actually believe themselves doing one day, right? So that reignites that learning that might be a little dormant at times, that it might not be learning loss, but they may have just forgotten how to do something, and they just need to be reminded and modeled on how to do that. So we are working on how to do that more often and really have engaging implementation of our curriculums. And then lastly, to be a collaborator in their learning, right? To have a voice, to have choice, to share their interests, and even just being able to set their own goals in class. Maybe they're working on an essay and they're like, oh, I really want to work on this with the next essay, right? Just those conversations about growth and growth mindset, and being, I guess, even more than a collaborator in their learning. Now I'm thinking that I like the word better as a partnership in their learning, and that they have a voice in that process. So we have begun this professional learning, and teachers have had some collaborative time, to begin this work, and really focusing on it for our students.
Because we know ultimately that all the planning that we do as teachers needs to connect with students, or the planning wasn't worth it. So we could technically have everything ready to go, but it's really that interaction with our students that makes learning happen. And there's a lot of research behind the power of student agency. And when students are engaged in that learning, the outcome is much higher. So like Annie said, it might not all be new learning. Some of it we are seeing in many places across the levels is just learning how to learn again, learning how to be in school again, learning how to navigate content in ways that we used to. So that is a topic that we have spoken about with our leaders and with our teachers, and will continue to do so as part of our goals and underneath all of the work that we're all doing around rebounding this year. Thank you, John. With the slide, we're done. So that was just an overview of some of the professional learning, the big professional learning goals this year. And then Annie just popped out something that recently all of our teams across the grade levels and across the essentials have been looking at. So any questions about the professional learning? Kathleen?
And that's wonderful. I was wondering, in the process of talking about student agency, is there a toolbox of explicit language that the teachers are talking about to give the children? Because just like in Ruler, it provides the framework, or is it just through discussion?
Yes, it's actually a part of the text that we've provided our teachers with. There's actually a whole module on student agency, and our departments had time to work through that with their department leaders, sometimes with Jeff and Annie, sometimes in smaller groups, to break out what that looks like. What does that look like in art? What does that look like in music? So yes, there's specific strategies in there that the teachers are going to go and continue to work through, because some of them are already in place, and then come back in our next time together and see how that's going, and some next steps from there.
Thank you. I have a feeling, I think we did this in time.
Yes, we did.
I think 2 minutes to go, but anyway, I want to thank everyone for coming at this this hour. I know for you it's not that early, and I look forward to our next conversations. This has been very helpful, and hopefully it's been helpful to the community, and I'll write up my notes.
Okay.
Thank you
so much. Thank you for having us. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Marie, you want to stay
Thank
on?
you. Bye-bye.
Hi, thank you.
Good morning, team. Do you want to stay on? John Mansfield, once we're off YouTube, if